Welcome! This is Dr. McDaniel at GYN Corner. I'm a board-certified obstetrician-gynecologist in New York City, and I'm bringing to you all things health-related for women. Thank you for joining me today at GYN Corner. If you enjoy these presentations, please hit the follow button on Facebook and the like button, and check out the YouTube. It's also called GYN Corner. Hit that subscribe button and check out the podcast. Guess what? It's called GYN Corner. And please leave a review and let others know what you enjoy about GYN Corner. And please place comments and questions to give me feedback on the presentations, what you enjoy, what you'd like to hear more of, and any questions you have, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Today, I'm speaking about breastfeeding. I decided to speak about breastfeeding because I think I do mostly GYN, non-obstetrical related topics. I try to do some OB topics, kind of pepper those in as I can. And I'm speaking about breastfeeding because a lot of women plan on breastfeeding their babies, and then I guess they say bada bing, bada bang. After a couple of days or a week or so, they're given up, they're frustrated, or if they have a helpful midwife or the La Leche organization that they can contact, they'll kind of limp along for a few more weeks. But a very, very small percentage of women will breastfeed their children longer than 6 weeks, certainly very few longer than 6 months. I know the pediatricians recommend ideally a 6-month minimum. After 6 months, it's kind of icing on the cake, but 6 months ideally to help impart a lot of the immune system support that decreases the risk of infections and the risk of allergies for babies and for children as they get older. So ideally, you'd like to breastfeed for 6 months. Now, I have 4 children. I breastfed all of those 4 children. The baby, because I knew she was going to be the last one, the last of the Mohicans, I breastfed her for 13 months, but the others were all less than 6 months. My first child I breastfed for about, I believe I breastfed him for about 10 weeks, 10 or 11 weeks. And that was because, unlike a lot of women, I actually had too much breast milk. I was constantly producing breast milk, constantly leaking breast milk, constantly engorged. Literally 3 minutes after I would breastfeed him, the milk would come in really strong and start leaking. And I realized that a lot of older women, when they have children, they have very little breast milk or less breast milk than with the ones when they were younger. And I realized the reason why I had so much breast milk with the first child was because for the first few hours he was in the nursery being checked out, and one of the nurses offered me a breast pump because I said I was going to breastfeed. And it's a supply and demand issue. So if you don't nurse very often, within the first 24 to 36 hours, if you barely nurse, then your body or your brain, because it's really a reflex to the brain, to the hypothalamus, the pituitary, your brain thinks you don't need much milk, so it doesn't produce much milk. If you have frequent nursing, if you nurse a lot in the first 36 hours or so, your brain will think you need a lot of milk. It'll start really producing on the track for frequent nursing, or milk letdown is what I was going to say. So for the first child, because he was in the nursery for the first several hours and the nurse had given me a pump, I just started pumping frequently. Now, most women who have had a baby know that initially, the first couple of days, you don't have breast milk. You have what's called colostrum, and it's like a super heavy cream. So instead of whole milk, you have heavy cream. And your body doesn't produce a lot of that colostrum. It usually produces maybe a half an ounce or so at a time. But because I had the breast pump and I was worried that I wasn't going to have much colostrum for him to drink, I just constantly pumped, like I would pump with that the machine for about 2 to 3 minutes, and I'd give it a break for a few minutes, and then I'd pump again. So I just, like every 5 to 10 minutes, I just kept using the breast pump. And the colostrum, right after I'd had the baby, within 4 or 5 hours, I had about 3 ounces of colostrum, which is about about 75-80% more, probably about 8 times more colostrum than the average woman will produce naturally. But that was because I was using the pump, and the pump was stimulating the reflex in the pituitary for milk letdown, or at that time colostrum. So my recommendation is to always request a breast pump after you have the baby, and try to pump frequently. The babies aren't going to be super hungry. They're going to nurse when you put them directly on after they're delivered. They're going to nurse for maybe a minute, and then they're going to fall asleep. So if you use the breast pump, you can pump for a good 4 or 5 minutes, give it a break for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then pump again for a good 4 to 5 minutes. You can do that frequently in the first 24 hours, and that will get your body on a pathway to produce a good quantity, a large quantity of colostrum, and eventually milk. Now, the other tip I would have is that to try to put the babies on, not just when you think they're hungry, but to put them on the breast on a schedule. That also will maintain or continue that stimulation for the brain to produce breast milk. I know a lot of women, patients that I've had, they will only put the baby on when they're crying that they're hungry, and then they're really happy if the babies sleep throughout the night because they get to sleep throughout the night, and of course we're all tired. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you want to breastfeed for any length of time, because if you don't pump or nurse the baby during the night, your body's going to get used to not producing milk for several hours at a time, 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. So what I used to do was I would set my alarm clock. Most of my babies did not wake up in the middle of the night to nurse, so I would set my alarm clock. In fact, I don't think any of them woke up in the middle of the night to nurse. I set my alarm clock every 3 hours, and I would get up every 3 hours and just pump for 5 or 6 minutes, 3 minutes on one side, 3 minutes on the other side, go back to bed. And I set it every 3 to 4 hours every night. So that way I continued to stimulate the brain to produce the breast milk for the babies. And then throughout the day, I would put them on the breast. And if they didn't nurse much, or they'd spit out the breast because they absolutely weren't hungry, then I would pump instead of nursing. And that continued the stimulation to the brain to produce the milk. So I hope that's been helpful information on nursing. I'll be back at the next presentation and speak about some of the nitty-gritty, the ins and outs, the to-dos on actual putting the baby on and nursing. Thank you for joining me here at GYN Corner. This is Dr. McDaniel. I'm in New York City, so if you're in the tri-state area, come on by. We're a few blocks down from Empire State Building and around the corner from Penn Station and Macy's. Hit the follow button, hit the subscribe buttons, check out the YouTube channel. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.